Welcome to ZoomInData. Hello everyone. Thank you for joining this focused session on Azure Functions Proxies, the legacy feature that many developers still encounter in older projects. We will cover what proxies were, why they were deprecated, how they worked, their configuration, use cases, migration paths to modern solutions like API management and HTTP triggers, and best practices for replacing them safely. If you are maintaining legacy function apps, planning a migration, or preparing for interviews that include historical Azure features, this session will give you clear, ready-to-use knowledge. If you find it helpful, please like, share, and subscribe to ZoomInData for more Azure deep dives. Let us begin. What were Azure Functions Proxies? Azure Functions Proxies were a built-in feature, introduced in 2017, that let you create lightweight API gateways directly inside a function app. They allowed you to define routes, forward requests to backend URLs, override headers, and apply basic transformations without writing code. Proxies acted as a reverse proxy layer. They handled incoming HTTP requests and routed them to other services or mocked responses. They were very popular for simple facade patterns, versioning, and mocking in early serverless projects. Why are proxies deprecated? Microsoft deprecated Azure Functions Proxies in September 2021 because they lacked advanced features needed for modern API management. Proxies had limited capabilities, no rate limiting, no caching, no developer portal, and no rich policy engine. Azure API Management, APIM, and Azure Front Door offer far superior functionality for routing, security, and governance. Microsoft recommends migrating to APIM, API routes in Functions, or other gateway solutions for all new and existing projects. Explain proxies. JSON configuration. Proxies. JSON was the configuration file, placed in the root of your function app, that defined all proxy routes and rules. It used JSON structure with $schema, proxies, object, and individual proxy entries with match condition, route, methods, and backend URI. Example: a proxy could route API v1 orders to a backend service and override response headers or status codes. The file was deployed with your function app. Changes required redeployment. How did proxies handle routing? Proxies matched incoming HTTP requests against route templates defined in Proxies, JSON. Route templates supported wildcards and parameters. Example: API, version, orders, order id. Matched requests were forwarded to the specified backend URI, or returned mocked responses if configured. Proxies could override request headers, query strings, and backend URLs dynamically. What was the use case for proxies? Proxies were commonly used as a simple API facade to hide backend URLs or combine multiple services. They were great for API versioning, route, v1 to one backend and v2 to another. Proxies also served as lightweight mocks during development or testing. They provided a quick way to add CORS, header overrides, or response transformations without extra code. How do you migrate from proxies to modern solutions? The recommended migration path is to Azure API Management, APIM, for full-featured API gateway capabilities. For simple routing, use Azure Functions HTTP triggers with route attributes or middleware in isolated model. Replace proxies with APIM policies for rate limiting, caching, JWT validation, and transformation. Test in parallel. Keep old proxies active during transition and switch traffic gradually. Explain backend URL overriding in proxies. Backend URL overriding let you dynamically change the target URL based on request parameters or headers. Use placeholders like request headers x custom header in the backend URI field. Example: backend URI https://backend region contoso.com/API routed based on region header. This was useful for multi-region backends or A/B testing without changing route definitions. What authentication did proxies support? Proxies supported basic authentication forwarding, pass-through headers like authorization. They could add fixed headers or query parameters for backend auth. No native token validation or OAuth that required manual code or APIM. Proxies themselves did not authenticate callers. They relied on downstream services. How did proxies handle CORS? Proxies allowed CORS configuration directly in proxies. JSON with response overrides section. You could set access control, allow origin, allow methods, and allow headers for each proxy route. Example: response overrides, response headers, access control allow origin, asterisk. This was useful for exposing APIs to web clients without code changes. Explain request response overrides. Request overrides let you modify incoming request before forwarding, add, remove headers, change method, or rewrite URL. Response overrides modified the backend response, change status code, add headers, or rewrite body. Example: set backend request headers x custom to a fixed value or request parameter. These overrides made proxies very flexible for header manipulation and status translation. What is the replacement for proxies in APIs? Azure API Management is the primary replacement. It offers full API gateway features including routing, policies, and developer portal. For simple cases, use Azure Functions HTTP triggers with root attributes or middleware in isolated model. Azure Front Door or Application Gateway can also serve as reverse proxies with advanced routing and WAF. All modern replacements provide better security, monitoring, and scalability than proxies. How do you achieve similar functionality with API management? Import your function app as a backend in APIM. It auto-discovers HTTP functions. Define routes and operations in APIM. Use policies for header overrides, transformations, and CORS. Add rate limiting, JWT validation, caching, and analytics, features proxies never had. Publish APIs with subscription keys. Clients get a modern developer portal. Explain proxies for mocking. Proxies were frequently used to mock backend services during development or testing. Set backend URI to a static mock URL or use request override to return fixed responses. Example: return 200 with hard-coded JSON body for API test without a real backend. This helped isolate front-end development from back-end availability. How did proxies handle versioning? Proxies handled API versioning by defining different routes in proxies. JSON. Example: v1 * to one backend, v2 * to another. You could override backend URI based on request path, headers, or query parameters. This allowed gradual rollout of new versions without breaking old clients. Modern replacements like APIM provide much richer versioning and policy control. What was the performance impact of proxies? Proxies added a small amount of latency, typically 10 to 50 milliseconds per request due to extra hop. They ran on the same function app instance, no additional scaling needed. Performance was acceptable for simple routing but not ideal for high-throughput APIs. Proxies had no caching or advanced load balancing. APIM is far better for scale. Explain proxies in consumption plan. Proxies worked in consumption plan, same as premium or dedicated. They scaled automatically with the function app, no extra configuration needed. Cold starts affected proxies just like regular functions. Premium plan was recommended for low latency APIs. Cost was the same as regular function executions, no additional charge for proxies. How do you disable proxies in existing apps? Proxies are automatically disabled if proxies JSON is removed from the deployment package. Delete proxies JSON from your project and redeploy. The feature stops working. Existing proxy routes return 404 after removal. Microsoft no longer supports proxies. Migration is strongly recommended. What is the legacy support status? Azure Functions proxies are fully deprecated since September 2021. No new features or bug fixes. Legacy support continues in existing function apps. They still run but are unsupported. Microsoft will eventually remove the feature. Migration is mandatory for long-term stability. All documentation and tools now point to APIM or HTTP triggers as replacements. Explain proxies for microservices facade. Proxies were commonly used as a simple facade to unify multiple microservices behind a single domain. Route, API, orders to one backend and API, customers to another, all through one function app. Add consistent headers, cause, or response transformations across routes. This pattern is now better handled by Azure API management with richer policies. How do you handle proxies in deployment? Proxies JSON was deployed as part of your function app package, zip or run from package. Changes to proxies required redeployment of the app. Use CI/CD pipelines, GitHub Actions, Azure DevOps to deploy proxies JSON alongside code. After deprecation, remove proxies JSON during migration deployments. What is the role of route templates in proxies? Route templates define the incoming path pattern in proxies. JSON, example, API, version, orders, id. Templates supported wildcards, asterisk, and path parameters. Values were available in overrides. They allowed flexible routing without code changes. Parameters could be used in backend URI or header overrides dynamically. Explain proxies logging. Proxies logged incoming requests, backend responses, and errors to the function's host logs. Logs appeared in Application Insights or Logstream if enabled. You could add custom logs via response overrides, logs, array in proxies, JSON. Logging was basic, no structured dimensions or advanced tracing. How do you troubleshoot proxies? Check Logstream in the portal for real-time proxy request and response logs. Enable application insights to capture detailed traces and failures. Test routes with curl or postman. Verify backend URI and overrides. Look for 502 504 errors, often caused by backend timeout or misconfiguration. How do you migrate to HTTP triggers? Replace each proxy route with a dedicated HTTP triggered function. Use function code to forward requests to the original backend URI using HTTP client. Implement header, query overrides and response transformations in code. Add authentication, logging, and error handling, more flexible than proxies. Best practices for replacing proxies. Migrate to Azure API Management for full gateway features, routing, policies, analytics. For simple cases, use Azure Functions HTTP triggers with root attributes or middleware. Use managed identities and private endpoints. Never expose function keys. Test migrations in parallel. Keep old proxies active during transition. Document old proxy routes and map them to new endpoints. Enable application insights for monitoring during and after migration. Avoid proxies in new projects. They are legacy and unsupported. Thank you for watching this complete guide to Azure Functions Proxies, the legacy feature, why it was deprecated, how it worked, and best practices for migrating to modern solutions like API management and HTTP triggers. If this session helped you with legacy maintenance, migration planning, certifications, or interviews, please like, share, and subscribe to ZoomInData. More Azure deep dives are coming soon. Stay connected and keep learning. Thank you. See you in the next video.